Thank you for joining us for Future of Manufacturing Part 1. Our program will begin in 5 minutes.
We're not famous. There are no stars in the sidewalk for us. No statues in our honor. We're just a small Georgia town of complete unknowns. The closest thing to a world stage is 81 miles away in Atlanta tonight. Our movie stardom, our football careers, they never took off. Because we are not known for who we are. We hope to be known for what we do, what we build. This thing we've assembled, it has a chance to be remembered. No, we are not famous, but we are incredible. And we make incredible things.
I think at Gas South, we continue to strive forward, that we continue to push the envelope. Winning isn't a destination, it's a journey, and we're all on it together.
This statement was not created in a glass tower. It was crafted and developed by the people of this company who overwhelmingly believe that we are a family that cares for people, does our best to do what's right, and we want to win.
It's about making our customers' lives easier. That's how Gas South puts people first. That's how we show our customers that we care.
Doing right by our people, our customers, our business partners in our community, it's really what we're all about.
Gas South feels like family to me in many ways.
What makes the Gas South way true for me is we are striving to be perfect in everything that matters.
Put people first, do what's right, strive to win. That's the Gas South way.
Some may say it's a small world. But we know there's an even bigger one waiting for you. One where you can outdo yourself by doing more than ever before. See new things, experience new places, create new memories. All in a vehicle that will ignite every one of your senses, especially your sense of adventure. Let everyone else chase the American dream. You're already living it. And this ride will make the life you've earned even more satisfying. It's 1 part power, 2 parts style, and all of the things you've ever wanted out of life. So skip the movies and spend a night with the stars. Immerse yourself in the big, amazing world all around you and rediscover the fun of getting lost in the moment. This is adventure. This is joy. This is living. And you deserve more of it. EasyGo. Live larger.
Please welcome the President and CEO of Georgia Chamber, Chris Clark.
Hi, I'm Chris Clark, President, CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for joining us for our New Economy series, The Future of Manufacturing, which we're also treating as part of our Resiliency Roundtable efforts as Georgians reopen and get back to work. So today we're happy to focus on manufacturing, the impact during COVID-19, and where manufacturing's going. But before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, Textron Specialized Vehicles, and you're going to be hearing from their CEO in just a few minutes, and our silver sponsor, Gas South. Of course, we're always happy to have Kia, the official SUV of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and then our affiliates and partners, Deloitte, who are helping us with our Resiliency and Recovery Initiative, our friends at Next Generation Manufacturing, who obviously have a lot to do with the topic we're talking about today, and then our friends at the Georgia Hispanic Chamber and Go Beyond Profit. So before we start our dialogue, I really want to spend a few minutes and talk about where we are as a state of Georgia economically to put it in perspective as we think about manufacturing. So let's just jump right into it. Here's the deal. We have 3 stages of what's happened around the world. Stage 1 was the response to COVID-19. You had healthcare management step up so that they could treat those folks that were infected. You had government step up to test individuals around the world. And you had critical industry and service sector, much of which was manufacturing, respond with their critical needs. Then we're kind of in that second stage right now, right? It's reemergence. And so that's when corporate citizenship steps in, and we all have to focus on protecting the health and safety of our employees, our customers, our suppliers. Individuals have to take responsibility. And then obviously government starts working on mitigation, which looks much like contact tracing. And then hopefully soon we'll be able to move into stage 3, which is where we reimagine not just the economy, but society as well. So we'll reimagine how we educate, how we do workforce development. Government will have to switch their focus to the long-term recession response, and businesses will enter what we call the post-COVID economy, and how that impacts every single industry sector out there. Now, let's look at how this has impacted us so far. You know, the number of unemployment really here has been a little bit of a roller coaster. In February, when the response first started, Georgia had the lowest recorded unemployment rate in our history, in the history of the state of Georgia. But by May, we were at 12%, which was the highest unemployment rate ever recorded. Now, many economists believe that we'll still be hovering around 9 to 10% unemployment by December. And so this issue with underemployment, with folks not coming back to work because of automation, that's going to be an issue that continues to impact our state and impacts manufacturing for quite a while to come. Now, of all the industry sectors hit hardest by COVID-19, I think you'd say hospitality and retail were at the top. Well, what does retail have to do with manufacturing? Well, let's be honest, retail's the end of the line. If you're not selling stuff, then you don't need us to manufacturing it. Now, in the response stage of COVID-19, you had 250,000 U.S. retail closures, some temporary, some permanent. In the state of Georgia, as we stand here today in June, we have about 90% of Georgia retail reopened. That other 10%, it's going to be a struggle. Some might not return, and some might come back as a very different business. But the bigger issue is what happens long term. Now, we were already tracking record numbers of retail closures in America last year. Now what we believe, according to every expert out there, you could see 100,000 fewer brick and mortar retail shops in the U.S. within the next 5 years, which obviously is going to impact how manufacturers deliver their end products. And you're seeing manufacturers in Asia right now actually start selling directly from the manufacturer to the customer. And so it's really a time of a lot of change, and you can see that in the most recent numbers that we have. Manufacturing output for the last quarter was down 13.7%. That's the largest decrease since 1919, an unbelievable number hitting our manufacturing. And that has helped facilitate global trade contraction at a rate of 11%. And when you realize that most Georgia manufacturers are interrelated, their supply chains are global, you can really see what that impact is. So What does it look like as we come out of COVID-19? Well, we think there are 4 kind of drivers of every economic sector that you're all going to need to be familiar with, no matter what your industry sector is. One is going to be health and wellness. I don't care what your business does, we are all in the business of health and wellness now. You're going to see companies invest in health and wellness and safety. You're going to see more investment into biotech growth. It's really going to drive a huge sector of the economy, particularly here in Georgia. Next, you're going to see companies invest in sustainability and resiliency. Some of that might be like cyber investment. Others might be in more green energy needs. But you're going to see companies that care about taking care of their employees, their customers, as well as the environment, because now, because of COVID, we clearly see the connection out there. And so expect a huge growth sector, and every business is going to have to figure out how are we going to be more sustainable and how are we going to be more resilient. We also know that every industry sector, as well as government, is going to be impacted by digital disruption. Now, while we saw retail really take a hit, what we also saw was non-store retail grow by 21%. Zoom meetings, virtual conferences just like this one are going to be kind of the norm as we move forward. And so manufacturers, retailers, small businesses, nonprofits are all going to have to embrace virtual learning, distance learning, virtual workplaces. And then the fourth area is this accelerated innovation. What we thought was going to happen 10 years from now is really going to happen in the next 10 months. We've seen some studies by Deloitte and others that have talked about the fact that industries were going to ramp up certain new technologies like artificial intelligence over the next 5 years. Well, instead, they're able to do it literally in 6 to 7 months. We talked with a small business owner just last week. She was going to invest in some new technologies over the next 2 years. She actually was able to do it in 2 months. And so companies are going to invest in these platforms. They're going to accelerate their innovation. And if your business is not disrupting itself and innovating itself, someone else is going to do that for you. So we're excited to have a great panel discussion for you today with 3 good friends of the Georgia Chamber. You all know Stuart Counants, who's the COO of Kia Motors. He's going to be joining us, as well as Gunnar Cleveland, who's the President, CEO of Textron Industrial Segment and Textron Specialized Vehicles, which I'll tell you more about what they make in a few minutes. And Dee Dutt, who's a principal with Deloitte Consulting, and he's really a leader in supply chain and network operations to give us more of the global picture of where manufacturing is going over the long term. So I hope you enjoyed the program today. And I also want to remind you that tomorrow we'll be having a similar session on the future of minority manufacturing in Georgia. And then on the 25th, I hope that you'll join us for our Day of Dialogue. So let's jump into our discussion today with Stuart Counants. All right, so our first guest with us today is Stuart Counants, who is COO of Kia Motors Company and a great member of the Georgia Chamber Board of Directors. You know, Kia is really one of the pride points for the state of Georgia. And Kia, you know, we love the fact that the official car of the Georgia Chamber is the Kia Telluride. And I got to tell you how much I've missed driving it during those 3 months of the shutdown. Didn't get a lot of use during that time, but I'm glad to be back on the road now in my Telluride, and I absolutely love it. So we appreciate you guys for manufacturing that down there. But thank you for being with us. And, you know, our guests today and the folks that will watch this on Rewind are really interested in kind of what happened to manufacturing, what happened at Kia during the COVID shutdown. Where are you today? What does recovery look like? And, you know, the big question is, what does resiliency look like for manufacturers as we go forward? So, Stuart, thanks for being with us, and we're looking forward to hearing your story.
Well, I appreciate it. It's for everyone. It certainly has been a very difficult time. I think clearly in the manufacturing world, we've all had to go back and look at how we run our operations. Typical manufacturing, you have people that are interacting with one another. It puts them in certainly close proximity, and we had to take into account how this new current COVID situation is going to change our operation. We actually got to the end of March time period, and then we spent the entire month of April down. In that time period, we had to go back and relook at how the car was going together. What that means is we had to look at the job allocation process and the methodology in which we were going to put the car together. So you had to maybe move some tools and parts around in order to create the social distancing guidelines that we were going to be asked to observe. We looked at procedures of how we were going to get the team members into the facility from a health point of view, but then also certainly keep them safe during the work time. Some things that we have done and are continuing to do when a team member enters the facility, they have a temperature check every day. If they go out for lunch, they have to go back through that process. We implemented face masks that everyone in the facility has to wear one. And those certainly have created their own sets of challenges as an individual's moving around. They're not ideally maybe the most comfortable thing to wear, but yet all of our team members have been very cooperative and understand what we're trying to do and keep our business going while keeping them safe and healthy. We've also implemented recently some on-site testing. So if a team member has those conditions that have been outlined through the CDC, we take them to our medical facility and we can take a test and get some results back for that individual within usually 24 to 48 hours. So that's also helped from a peace of mind point of view from our team members. Of course, if you have individuals that identify themselves as having one of the symptoms, there's certain protocols that we go throughout our facility. Those were thought out in the beginning before we brought any team members back. And then that also provided, we believe, some assurity to the team members of how we were taking the right path to ensure their safety as well as getting them back to work. Supply base certainly has had a lot more difficulty. We're large and we have a tremendous workforce, not only from a talent point of view, but also from a numbers point of view, but the supply base has also had to go through the same exact issue. It was difficult getting the supply base back up and working as there were different rules and regulations that we saw in the news nightly. Different states had different protocols of how they would open back business. Automotive, at least through the state of Georgia, was deemed as under the essential guidelines, under the CISA guidelines. So that helped us to get moving, but of course you can't make cars unless you have parts to make cars with. From a supply point of view right now, where we're dealing, having some difficulties in dealings is certainly our products that are coming out of Mexico. They're in a different state than certainly we are in the U.S. with dealing with the COVID situation, so it brings its own set of challenges under the current system. We are back up and running as of the 1st of May. We ran 3 one-shift operations, primarily because we were supply chain constrained, but it also let us carefully analyze the changes that we made in our process and our protocols for dealing with COVID to make sure that we were ready to go when we can return to a 3-shift operation. This week and last week, we're running a 2-shift operation, so we're slowly ramping it back up, and it's a good thing. We're seeing faces that we haven't seen in quite some time. When team members maybe were working 1 shift out of every several weeks. So you have to go back through that retraining process also with those individuals. But we're slowly getting back to a healthy state. I think it's certainly something that we're going to have to continue to watch, not only from our own internal procedures, but certainly from external as it relates to the supply chain area. The good thing is that the automotive market is doing much better than any of us anticipated. We saw from a Kia brand actually very good numbers for the month of May. Certainly not hitting a business plan, but much higher than what we anticipated when this situation started. And that's certainly driving our own team members that we are working with them on some different modified schedules to maximize what we can out of the facility, again, while maintaining their safety. So it's it's been quite an interesting process.
So, it sounds like it, Stuart. I'm curious. We hear a lot and we see a lot about accelerated innovation and companies using this period to kind of jumpstart investments they were going to make long term or change their technology platforms. Any of those types of activities that you've been able to do during the downturn, or do you see an acceleration of adoption of whether it's robotics or other, other platform-based software programs within the plant?
Well, there hasn't been any real significant changes to our business, excluding internal meetings or even meetings like this. We've had to learn how to use different platforms to maintain the social distancing. I think a lot of people have found that to be quite interesting, where instead of getting 10 or 20 people together, is there an efficiency operations that we can manage out of that? I think that we will continue to explore that and figure out how that leads into improving our overall maybe HR administration type part of our business. From the actual manufacturing part, it hasn't had as significant an impact because we still are very dependent upon the human being a key part of that building process. So we're always looking at it, but I just don't think there's anything you could say directly related to the COVID situation.
Right. So prior to COVID, you launched the Telluride. I mean, really one of the fastest selling vehicles you've had, SUV of the year. The only place that SUV was being built was here in Georgia, being shipped all around the world. So I'm curious, have you seen demand? I know you've got pent up demand because all my friends are still waiting on one. But from a global perspective, with economies shut down at different places, are you seeing that demand return globally? And what does it look like in the short term here in the U.S.?
Well, speaking first to ours, yes, the Telluride still remains very popular. We're getting ready to launch the model year 21 version of that. So that pent-up demand with this COVID situation has clearly caused some frustration with our customers because we had no ability to build their cars. We're also, from a plant point of view, which is really being driven by our team members, we are launching the new K5, which is what we used to call the Optima. So it's a brand new car in the market, and also the Sorento will be launched within the fall time period. So those schedules have really been thrown off because of the COVID situation, and it's put a lot of our team into roles that they had not necessarily had to take over in previous years. That just means that we learn more about the car. We have our support, that can still come from Korea, but there's clearly some duties that have been passed over to us. I do think that one of the things that many businesses like ours have looked at is where is your supply chain and what opportunities are there? How do you get more control over your piece of the business when the state of Georgia was up and moving and then compared to some other areas that were slower? But you have a supply chain coming out. So I do believe that companies are going to reevaluate whether it be inventories that they maintain in this just-in-time world, or are you going to have some other change in localization or other central hub type localizations. But remains to be seen. I hear that as a common remark from many of our competitors. So it's a good opportunity, but it could change the landscape within the next several years.
So Stuart, two last questions, and I'll ask them together so you can think through them. The first one is, I'm curious, what's the biggest lesson learned through this, this incredible disruption for you and your team? So one, what's the number one lesson learned? And number two, what advice do you have for other manufacturers, or particularly for small manufacturers in Georgia that are trying to become more resilient and able to turn things around and respond just like Kia's been able to do?
Well, I think one thing clearly, we all need to look at we talk about contingency plans, but usually those are based on a fire, a piece of equipment going down, something of that type nature. To say that you have a pandemic type plan, I think that that is something that we as a company clearly are going to come away with, that we have to be really cognizant that that's an opportunity to grow. It has taught us a lot about how to address the safety and welfare, but more importantly, I think the communications with our team members. These team members were out of our facility for a number of weeks, and we were reaching out to them, talking to them just to make sure, one, that they and their families were okay, but also letting them know what's going on from the inside of our business. So we found a lot of advantages in that. You could arguably say you created some new relationships that you maybe didn't have, or you certainly enhanced those relationships. In a people business, and I would argue that we are a people business, we learned a lot out of that. But you also learned to challenge not only yourselves, but others in how to think differently than you had previously. So it's been interesting, but I think we're all going to get through it.
Right.
It's just we're going to have to be patient. It's not going to return overnight.
Sure. And all those people that are waiting for the Kia Telluride, just keep waiting. You're working on it. We'll get them, right?
Absolutely. We're working on it. And as soon as we can get back to a 3-shift operation, we are headed in that direction. So it's a good time to be in the automotive sector, and we certainly love being here in Georgia.
Well, Stuart, we appreciate you. We appreciate the incredible team that you've got down at Kia, and know that we're all here for you. So thank you for what you do. We'll be in touch.
Appreciate it. Everyone stay safe.
Well, thank you. Joining us now is Gunnar Cleveland, who's President CEO of Textron Industrial Segment and Textron Specialized Vehicles. For those of you that aren't familiar, they make E-Z-GO golf carts, Cushman Utility, Arctic Cat snowmobiles, side-by-sides, ATVs, Jacobson turf care equipment, aviation ground support. And Gunnar, I tell you, I'm appreciative of the great Georgia Chamber member you are, the great really community leader that you are there. But I also love my E-Z-GO golf cart that I drive in Peachtree City. And so we are big fans of E-Z-GO in the Clark household. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for what you guys do in the community every day. And you know, we're having this discussion about the future of manufacturing, about being more resilient, particularly how you survive a COVID-19. And you know, we really look forward to hearing the E-Z-GO story, what you guys have been doing for the last 4 months, and what does the future look like. So thanks for being with us. We look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, thank you for having us here today. I'm honored to be here and representing the great company of Textron Specialized Vehicles. As we're coming through this and looking out behind what has been a COVID-19 time, we're proud to be a Georgia company. We have a long history here. E-Z-GO has been here since 1954, and as you mentioned, you see E-Z-GO in many places. It's an iconic golf brand, and I hope you all also saw the match with Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady that really showcased our golf cars right in the middle of this pandemic and showing that you could be out there and still live a little. For Peachtree and how you use, I have my own golf cart that I use at home as well, love it. Our marketing team really hit the spot on the little video that you've seen, showing how people are using these private golf cars to drive around their neighborhoods and to visit and live a little, live larger, as we say. We manufacture many different brands at Textron Specialized Vehicle. Particularly here in Georgia, it is E-Z-GO and Cushman that you mentioned. Our big brand in aerospace is Tug up north of Atlanta, which is in the Kennesaw area, and we got 2 facilities there. So we're 1,500 employees in Georgia, One brand you didn't mention was Tracker Off-Road that we have together with Bass Pro. You can get those vehicles at any Bass Pro or Cabela's, and we build those here in Georgia as well. So we're proud to stand with you and get this economy going again. We recognize that the state has to recover, and I think manufacturing will lead it. So just a little bit about our journey. We took, when this first started, actually, I came back from Europe, I think on one of the last flights that was possible to come back into the country without any restrictions, and walked in here in Augusta to what we saw as a major supply issue, specifically from China, but also from Italy at the time. So we started immediately with what I termed from my background in aerospace, we called it war rooms, but I've learned that we call them situation rooms there. So the situation room was first on supply chain. And we met every morning to take a look at how we would support our production. But it became very, very clear and very quickly clear that the demand was what was going to shape the next several months. So we stood up a demand room and we met there every morning. At the same time as we started to look at, how is this going to affect our employees and the safety of our employees? So we stood up a human resources situation room, looking at what was going on at all of our locations around the world and how we could protect our employees as this evolved. And I think you wouldn't be surprised to say that the last situation room that we stood up was a financial, basically a cash room, making sure the business would run. So with that as a background, I think that shaped how we day by day changed how we reacted to this pandemic.
So where are we at today? Are you guys back up, Gunnar, in full operations? You're one shift, two shift. Where are you today, and what does that look like over the next month or so?
Yeah, it has changed continuously. We are back up full operation here in Augusta. Both our PTV and golf business has been very strong through this. We've actually been surprised at how strong the demand for personal vehicles have been. We've had in May we had probably the best month ever on demand, which it was nice to see. It was difficult to respond to, and we couldn't quite explain it, but people wanted to get out. Is how we described it. But we started out here with we had a case in our factory, and we decided to shut down and do a deep clean, and then we took 10 days to figure out how we could build going forward with total social distancing, both in the factory and in the break rooms and the cafeteria and so on. So the team did a phenomenal job putting together a very good plan for how we could go back to production. However, we knew that we couldn't keep up with the demand on golf and PTV. So we were trying to look forward to see how we could increase that. So we initially started with normal work week, then we increased it to 7 days a week because we couldn't have everybody in. We could rotate people through and have everybody working, but just over a full 7 day week. We still couldn't keep up with demand. So our next step here was to find areas where we could have people working together closer, but with protective equipment. And so we've taken one step after another, and we're getting close to being back up to full production here in Augusta. In Kennesaw, it's not the same case. We've seen, and you've seen that the airline industry is completely stopped buying. So we have shut down there. We focused more on service and support of our customers, and then now we're starting to see some orders come in, and we'll slowly start the recovery operations there.
So, Gunnar, I've been in your plant many times, and I know you guys, your employees take a lot of pride in what they build over there, and I know you guys take pride in them as well. Are you telling your employees, hey, these safety measures, these protocols are going to be long-term or temporary? Are you actually changing your HR manuals and your policies to reflect this kind of new normal?
Yeah, first of all, new normal are the most scary words I hear. But we haven't gone to the extent that this will be how we work, because it's a little artificial. Our employees are great. They come into work and they want to work together. So it's the hardest part has been, how do we keep them apart, recognizing that this is for their own safety. And we continue to work with that. We have had, I would say, if I look worldwide, we've had less than 10 cases. And I feel very confident that none of that happened at work. So, which is what you would see in the communities. Our role as an employer is to make sure that they're safe when they come in here, and when we do have a case, we respond. Now, communications, we've learned we cannot communicate enough, and we communicate every day. Mm-hmm. And both I never thought I would do this, but I was on LinkedIn and FaceTime. I did addresses to our employees. A lot of people were home, especially during the time that we were shut down. And I would do right here in my office. I would sit down with my iPhone in front of me and give addresses to the company about what we were doing and where we were going. So social media, communications, written, posters in the factory and so forth, you cannot communicate enough.
Yeah. So that's probably a great lead into my last question, which is, what are those lesson learned, best advice that you have for other manufacturers? And obviously, one is you can't communicate enough, communicate. Right. What's that other bit of advice that you would give to your peers around Georgia right now as they start to reopen and look at for many of them, a very uncertain future too?
I think the culture of a company is going to bring you through any downturn and upturn and difficulties. We live and breathe our values. And one of our values is we win when we work together. That has been repeated so many times during this time. And then another one is we listen to the side. So there are a lot of great ideas out there from your employees. The solution is there, and sometimes it's hidden, so you have to bring it forward. But the culture of the company and the values is what's going to bring you through what's a very, very difficult time. And you can't go and change that because it will be recognized immediately.
Right. Well, Gunnar, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing what you've learned and the great work of E-Z-GO. And please know that we're all here rooting for you guys for the success, waiting for the next match as well. That was a lot of fun. But thank you for what you do, and God bless you.
Thank you, and thanks for hosting this for everyone Absolutely. Here in Georgia.
Well, wrapping up our discussion today is our friend Didi Dutt, who's a principal with Deloitte Consulting and is really a leader U.S. and globally in supply chain and network practice. He's got 20 years of experience. It's coming to us today directly from Detroit, obviously in the hub of manufacturing for America. Didi, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate Deloitte in helping with our resiliency and recovery initiative here at the Georgia Chamber and trying to help Georgia's economy get back on track. We really look forward to hearing from you about kind of the global perspective of what we're seeing in manufacturing and supply chain. So again, thanks for being with us and look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate it. And in the context of what's happening in supply chain with the COVID crisis as we're dealing with today, we're seeing different sectors across the businesses having different levels of impact. So let me kind of give you a couple examples. The consumer packaged good, food and beverage sector, right? There has been a response level, whereas you think about as COVID unfolded, right? And in our parlance, we break the COVID phasing into three chunks, right? We call it response, recover, and thrive. Response being how people are dealing with it, coping with it as the virus emerged, right? And then over the next 3 to 6 months as it kind of unfolds. Recover is basically as businesses started to reopen, restart started to occur, and then 6 to 9 months from there, probably a year based on whichever sector is involved. And then thrive is kind of getting back to the new normal and fully operating businesses, right, at scale. So different sectors, as I was saying earlier, have had different levels of impact, right? So if you look at supply chains, impact in food and beverage CPG sector, they started seeing pandemic levels of buying where people were buying and grocery stores were basically emptying out, and they started seeing supply requirements kind of 1.5 to 2 to 2.5 times what their normal demand requirements were. So think of the amplitude of the curve, right? Demand kind of spiked up, and they were trying to figure out how to respond. And there were supply chains made operational in terms of being able to make that response possible. On the other end of the continuum, we had companies like automotive OEMs where basically demand just dropped off a cliff, right? And there was people weren't buying cars. I mean, the dealerships weren't open. Okay, so those are two bookends, and then you also have kind of the med tech sector where medical device manufacturers, they were responding to ventilator, respirator demands, right? Very, very steep curves in terms of how they were trying to operate. So by sector, there's been a different level of impact in the supply chain. That's kind of point one. Point two, as we now go into recovery, right, at a global and even at a regional level across North America, the recovery is having different impacts. So case in point, firstly, we are seeing some fundamental shifts in how people are going to go purchase goods, right? So for example, in consumer products, retail, CPG, people have already pivoted towards online, right? Digitization of the online shopping experience was already happening to a much greater extent. We believe this pandemic is going to basically force that, and that digitization has just happened, right? It's just going to happen. Last mile delivery is a mandate, is going to happen even more. There is going to be no debate about it. Number two, demand sensing and shaping, right? We believe that there is going to be this need at a global and at a regional level to understand what is the true market demand, what are people really going to buy, what kind of things they want to purchase, right? And sensing that need is going to be critical. Number three, supply chain risk. As this virus unfolds and different countries open up at different points in time, or they close parts of the countries back down again, open it back up, as we're starting to see in South Korea, pieces of China and India, there is already a level of financial distress in the supply base. Take whichever supply base of choice, right? Whether it's an automotive tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, multi-tier supply base, if it's an industrial product manufacturer, if it's a consumer products manufacturer, there is distress and stress in the supply base. The ability to anticipate that risk operationally, financially, and then be proactive in terms of mitigating that risk is going to be crucial, right? And over the next 6 to 9 months, we absolutely expect there is going to be more and more of supply risk sensing requirements that are going to pop up. And some of the best companies are telling us, in the interest of resiliency of the supply chain, their point of view is, we had the Great Recession, we had the tsunami in Japan, we had the Thai floods. A resilient supply chain is one where you can A, sense demand, and B, assess the risk profile, and then be able to quickly respond no matter what what gets thrown at you, whether it's a black swan event or if it's a fire in a supply base, right? So that's going to be something that resilient supply chain leaders are putting in place no matter what. Couple more points of capability that we're also seeing that are becoming more and more crucial. Maintaining social distancing and use of digital technologies like IoT, et cetera, for proximity sensing, right? To be able to, inside a plant or inside a warehouse, maintain a 6 feet, 10 feet social distance requirement and then alert people that they're coming in, or whether through artificial intelligence and optical cameras to be able to recognize and alert, right? Including occupancy requirements, right? So that's becoming more and more relevant. We are also starting to see a very, very significant focus on cash, cost, liquidity management in terms of managing cash flow, because cash is king. And especially as this recovery unfolds, not knowing the rate at which demand is going to come back across different sectors, right? People are just being careful and sensitive. So cash preservation, cash conservation, and liquidity management, right? And any capabilities around tools, technology, solutions that allow that huge opportunity in terms of things that can be possible to happen there, whether it's working capital or whether it's structural costs, right? And the last couple of capability areas that we're seeing emerge in terms of problems people are dealing with, one, the ability to do this quick demand supply scenario balancing, right? Kind of modeling the demand supply scenarios based on changing demand needs and changing supply situations, right? What can I do? How can I? And being able to rapidly run those scenarios. And then the last piece is what we call dynamic network mitigation, right? Looking at multi-tier suppliers, tier 3, tier 2, tier 1, manufacturing plants, then outbound, right? Distribution channels based on the different modes of distribution centers, customer-facing retail locations, right? Across that entire value stream, the ability to kind of look at that multi-echelon network planning, redesigning implications to the network, right? Potentially even reducing risk by shortening the lead times across the supply chains, right? In some cases, resourcing actions is also a capability area. We're starting to see lots of asks and needs. So Chris, net being, we expect the situation to be dynamic over the next 6 months or so, at least. We expect different sectors come back at different rates. There is going to be stress in the supply chains, and there is going to be stress in the supply base. And these 5 or 6 capabilities I talked about are going to be like the bare fundamental essentials of what will start becoming requirements of a resilient supply chain. At the heart of it, a lot of digitization also occurring, right? The innovation and digitization at the core is suddenly gotten accelerated, right? I mean, the virus has already made digitization a catalyst to accelerate the transformation that people were already on, right? And that'll also help both in terms of supply chain effectiveness, efficiency, and then net end outcomes and experiences for our customers. So that's a high level view. Questions?
So Didi, thank you. That's a great overview. I just have a few questions here to follow up. A couple of them kind of general too for us out here. Do you see, I mean, we've seen different reports about a recovery timeline, some from 6 months, some to 24 to 36 months. What are you seeing? What are your kind of predictions, or what do you believe right now for a manufacturing recovery timeline?
I think, Chris, the manufacturing recovery timeline, as I said, will vary based on sector-based demand, right? So if you look at it, consumer packaged goods, food and beverage, right? Those sectors, the demand was there even as we went into the virus. Demand continued. People have to eat, right? Retail stores have to stay open, right? And companies like General Mills, others, Kellogg, they have to produce food that can get shipped to retail locations or get shipped through Amazon or others directly to your doorstep, right? So that sector, the demand continues strong and will stay. There's going to be no debate there. On the other end of the continuum, if you look at sectors like automotive, right? Volumes have dropped. I mean, we walked into the year with an assumption of a 16.8 million unit industry, right? At this rate, if we can even get to an 11 million or 12 million unit industry, it's going to be huge in the automotive business, right? This year. But there is, the demand is still there. People are still going to be buying cars. I mean, they're not buying cars at all, right? So the recovery rates across different sectors will vary. We do expect demand to start coming back, though, right? I mean, as the dealerships have started opening in the automotive business, as people are going back out, right? People are looking to purchase. There is latent demand in the marketplace. We are also starting to see a healthy demand from fleets because movement of goods has suddenly become more important, right? And you also see, if you actually go onto the Deloitte online site and look at our consumer tracker portal, we actually have a tracker we manage online where we're getting globally across 8 different or 10 different countries worldwide consumer sentiment, right? What are people buying? Percentage share of wallet? What are people looking to buy, right? Where is spend going to be? Mobility preferences, are people going on Ubers and Lyfts, or are the people willing to buy cars? Interestingly enough, we have seen a mobility shift already where people are not going into Ubers and Lyfts. Instead, people will want to potentially buy a car. So that's another interesting shift that's occurred, right? So the broadly, I would say it depends based on the sector and based on the needs. Certain sectors that are mandatory requirement, right? Med tech, medical devices, demand's going to be there, period, right? Other sectors, it'll be uneven. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely, and that's, I appreciate that input. You mentioned supply chain several times, so we again, keep hearing about the disruption of the supply chain, particularly from China, that we've experienced, and you see some manufacturers shift now, look for new suppliers from China to Taiwan to other locations. What do you see as far as reshoring and the opportunity for, bringing some of that manufacturing, those supply chains back domestically? And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing in Europe and Asia, around the world. So what insights do you have there?
We have gotten multiple requests from many different organizations we're working with where that question has been asked. I would probably answer the question in different parts. One, criticality of commodities. There are certain commodities that are essential and mandatory that will have to get resourced if there are impacts to the supply chain to mitigate shock. And not resourced in the sense that you're going to do a complete 100% pull everything back from China over back to nearshore or offshore, right? Nearshore locations. We're already seeing requests and people moving into multi-source actions where they will maintain a commodity, but they'll say, no, that commodity is critical enough where I want to have a alternate option where there is a nearshore or regional activation that I will execute, right? So that's an absolute viable discussion. People are considering those because of maintaining what you started with, supply chain resiliency. To maintain resiliency, I need to have alternates, right? That's just a prerequisite. Number two, there is going to be actions executed where, so I'll give you an example, right? Some of the longer lead supply chains, like you think about an automotive supply chain or a heavy industrial manufacturer supply chain, right? Right now, they are executing sourcing actions for vehicles that they're going to launch or products that they're going to launch 2 years out, right? So 2022 sourcing actions are being taken today, right? Just think about how far out you have to. You got to go through the product development process. I have to go certify my supplier. I have to do a supplier onboarding. I have to agree, right? I have to make sure my design assumptions are right. The product development life cycle is long enough in some of these areas, like especially complex, discrete manufactured products, right? Whether it's Textron, whether it's automotive, right? What have you, aerospace, it's long. Some of those sourcing decisions are being made today, right? And so it's not as is the virus going to. Those choices, we are making those choices today as we speak in terms of where should I source and where should I base my supply chain.
Right. All right. So last question for you. Number one top piece of advice for manufacturers in America today as we look at the next 6 months of uncertainty and as we move into the future. Number one advice.
I'll give you two, actually.
Okay. Throw a bonus one in.
Number one advice, and figure out mechanisms and processes and capability to sense demand. Demand sensing and demand shaping is going to be a prerequisite. Part two of that advice, establish capabilities and protocols to then sense supply risk so that you can actually meet that demand, right? Those two have to go hand in hand. Sense demand, do a better job of that, and mitigate and manage risk, right? Put those two together, you got a secret sauce.
That's great. Listen, Didi, thank you, and thank Deloitte and your whole team for what you do every day. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and to help Georgia as we recover and as we look at the future of manufacturing. Thanks so much. Well, thank you all for joining us today for our Future of Manufacturing and as part of our Resiliency Roundtable discussion. I want to thank again our incredible sponsors, Textron, Gas South, Kia. I want to thank Deloitte for being with us today as well. Tomorrow, we're going to continue this discussion about the future of manufacturing, but we're going to focus on minority manufacturing in the state of Georgia. So you can join us at 11 o'clock tomorrow. And then I also want to encourage you to join us on June 25th, Thursday, for a day of dialogue where we'll have a detailed discussion about racism and inequality and what you and your company can do to help move Georgia forward. Thank you for being with us. May God continue to bless our great state.
Thanks so much for tuning in with us today. We hope you will join us tomorrow for the Future of Manufacturing Part 2. If you haven't registered and would like to participate, then please visit georgiachamber.com/events.